October 27, 1858, New York City. A frail boy is born into a wealthy family, his lungs weak, his body thin, and his future uncertain. No one could have guessed that this sickly child, gasping for air in the middle of the night, would one day become one of the most vigorous and iconic presidents in American history. His name was Theodore Roosevelt. From the very beginning, life challenged him. Young Teddy, as his family called him, suffered from severe asthma attacks that left him bedridden for days. But instead of surrendering to weakness, he built his life around overcoming it. His father, a man of strong will, told him, "You have the mind, but you haven't the body. Without the help of the body, the mind cannot go as far as it should. You must make your body." Those words changed everything. And so, Theodore Roosevelt made himself. He took up boxing, he hiked, he rode horses, he lifted weights long before it was fashionable. The boy who could barely breathe became a man who would charge up mountains, wrestle with cowboys, and hunt wild animals in the American West. He wasn't born strong, he became strong through sheer determination. It was his first and greatest lesson, that character isn't given, it's built. Roosevelt entered Harvard full of energy, intellect, and enthusiasm, but tragedy would soon test his spirit again. In 1884, on a single day, his young wife Alice and his mother both died, hours apart in the same house. He wrote a simple, haunting line in his diary: "The light has gone out of my life." To escape the pain, he disappeared to the Dakota Badlands, trading the halls of Harvard for the harsh plains of the American frontier. There he lived among ranchers and cowboys, branding cattle, chasing outlaws, and finding peace in the simplicity of nature. The wilderness healed him, and in those open lands, the foundations of his rugged individualism were born. When he returned to politics, he brought that same frontier spirit with him, fierce, honest, and unstoppable. Roosevelt wasn't content with quiet bureaucracy. He saw government as a tool for moral action, something that should serve the people, not the powerful few. As police commissioner of New York City, he rooted out corruption. As Assistant Secretary of the Navy, he helped modernize America's fleet, and when the Spanish-American War broke out in 1898, he didn't just sit behind a desk. He formed his own volunteer cavalry, the Rough Riders, and charged up San Juan Hill in one of the most famous battles of the war. For Roosevelt, leadership meant action. You didn't tell people what courage was, you showed them. His rise after that was meteoric. In 1901, at just 42 years old, Theodore Roosevelt became the youngest president in U.S. history after the assassination of William McKinley. He was now the face of a nation entering the 20th century, powerful, growing, but in need of direction. And Roosevelt gave it direction. He saw himself as the steward of the people, responsible not just for preserving the Constitution, but for protecting the common good. He launched what he called the Square Deal, his promise of fairness for workers, businesses, and consumers alike. He took on massive corporations, the so-called trusts, that dominated industry and exploited ordinary Americans. When coal miners went on strike in 1902, he didn't send troops against them like presidents before him. He invited both sides to the White House to negotiate. For the first time, labor was treated as equal to capital. He wasn't afraid to use power when necessary, but he always aimed to balance it with justice. He broke up monopolies that strangled competition, yet he also recognized the need for strong business. To Roosevelt, progress wasn't about destroying wealth, it was about ensuring that power served the people, not the other way around. But his legacy didn't end with politics. Roosevelt's deep love for nature shaped modern environmentalism. During his presidency, he created 5 national parks, 18 national monuments, and 150 national forests. Over 230 million acres of land were placed under federal protection, an unprecedented act of conservation. He once said, "The nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets which it must turn over to the next generation, increased and not impaired in value." To Roosevelt, nature was more than a backdrop. It was a teacher, a test, and a sanctuary. The same wilderness that rebuilt him after tragedy became a gift he preserved for everyone. And yet, despite his success, Roosevelt's energy was relentless. He refused to slow down. He once remarked, "Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those timid souls who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." That quote captures the essence of his life, a life lived in bold colors, never in gray. After leaving the presidency in 1909, Roosevelt didn't fade quietly into retirement. When he disagreed with his successor, William Howard Taft, he launched his own progressive party, famously declaring, "I feel as strong as a bull moose." That's how the party got its nickname, the Bull Moose Party. Even after being shot during a campaign speech in 1912, he continued speaking for nearly an hour before finally going to the hospital. The bullet had pierced his chest, but he reasoned that because he wasn't coughing blood, it hadn't reached his lung, and therefore the speech must go on. That moment, calm, determined, and fearless, became a symbol of who Theodore Roosevelt really was. He wasn't perfect. He was impulsive, sometimes brash, and occasionally too confident in his own righteousness. But he lived with a purpose so fierce that even his flaws seemed part of his grandeur. He inspired millions to strive, to act, to believe that one person, through energy and conviction, could shape a nation. When he died in 1919 at the age of 60, Vice President Thomas Marshall said, "Death had to take him sleeping, for if Roosevelt had been awake, there would have been a fight." Theodore Roosevelt left behind more than laws and policies. He left behind an idea that life's value is measured not by comfort, but by courage. He taught that we grow stronger not when things are easy, but when we face the storms head on. From the sickly boy who could barely breathe to the president who breathed new life into a nation, Roosevelt's story remains a timeless reminder that strength is not inherited, it's forged. So today, on October 27th, remember him not just as a president or a soldier or a conservationist, but as a man who embodied the very spirit of daring greatly. Because as Roosevelt once said, "It is hard to fail, but it is worse never to have tried to succeed."